Hey, so making this video for you guys about the 100 Years' War to kind of recap everything and make sure we all know what's going on and we're all on the same page for the 100 Years' War. So go ahead and fast forward to whatever slide that you guys ended on Thursday for this class. But I wanted to do a video about the entirety of the 100 Years' War anyway, just to make sure that we had one. So you can just go ahead and fast forward to whatever point in which you need to get to. So the 100 Years' War, just remember, it was a conflict. It was 116 years long, basically over the French succession of the throne, where England was claiming they had a right to control over the English throne. Okay. Causes, like I just said, it was the French succession of the throne, where England claimed to have rule over France because of their connections to the Normans. Okay. Going into the war, France had a significant advantage from a population standpoint, an army standpoint, and a wealth standpoint. But England uh, refuted that with creating some better technology in the longbow and the cannon. Okay. So in the main battles, we have the Battle of Crécy, which took place in 1346, led by Edward III, who was the starter of the 100 Years' War by leading an invasion in 1337 and led the French to victory, or the English to victory, where the French suffered many casualties and the English only a few hundred. Then the next conflict that took place was 10 years later in 1356, led by Edward IV, who was the Black Prince of Wales because of his black armor. And ultimately, he brought the English to victory and forced John II to sign a treaty that gave French land to the English in northern France and in western France. Then in 1415, Henry V led an invasion that led to another very strong victory for England. And around 10,000 French perished, and only 100 English were killed, and 1,500 French nobles get captured. And Henry gained control of Normandy, Paris, and much, much, much of northern France. Okay, again, their technology proving to be a huge advantage on the battlefield. And so shortly after that, the next 5 years, there was negotiations between Henry V and Charles VI, and in the Treaty of Troyes was signed in 1420 that would essentially assign for English victory and hand over all of the land and territory to England after Charles VI's death. It disinherits Charles VII and makes Henry and Catherine's children, Catherine of Valois, who is the daughter of the French King Charles II, that would make their children that they would have together the next French kings, and that would lead to England controlling the entirety of France. But this is what France looks like at the signing of the Treaty of Troyes, and France eventually, obviously, will look. It will be completely shaded in light purple. But Joan of Arc was there to turn the tides of the war. So Joan was just a peasant girl who was raised in Burgundy, which was one of the places that was decimated by the English army. And basically, around 12, she started hearing voices, and they basically told her that she needed to lead the French to victory and push the English out of France. And so around that time, she signed up to become a knight and be part of the French military, rose through the ranks and concealed her identity for years and years and years until eventually she was found out. But the French commanders agreed with her and continued to listen to her, and ultimately was going to lead them to victory here in Orleans. And since the Charles VII, who was the one who was disinherited and wanted to try and re-inherit himself, was convinced that she was some sort of prophet sent by God, and telling her that telling Charles VII that they needed to go try and reconquer this town called Orleans. And so they go to Orleans, and Joan winds up leading the siege herself on the fortress and leads the French and inspires them to victory in Orleans. But shortly thereafter that, Joan of Arc winds up being captured in 1430 and brought back to England and tried for the crime of heresy because of the voices and all of the things that were going on. They basically just said that no person has a connection to God. And so they tried her for heresy and burned her for witchcraft at the stake. And then she became a martyr, a symbol of inspiration for the French moving forward. And they continued to fight and resist. And they threw the Treaty of Troyes out. And finally, in the Battle of Castilian, the French were finally victorious, and that permanently brought an end to the war. And so France had been through a lot, but now finally in 1453, after their victory, they had recaptured and reclaimed all of their territory, uh, especially the Duchy of Burgundy. And then the final consequences of the 100 Years' War. This moving forward would create a lot of tension and a rivalry between England and France. And we have some new weapon technology, the use of gunpowder to launch projectiles, developing gun barrels, early versions of machine guns. Feudalism starts to get weakened because of the decimation of the feudal lords all across France from England. And the beginning of the Reformation started because of all this questioning of the church, which we're going to get to in the next lesson about the Black Plague and how that was affecting Europe and why there were such long gaps between wars because of all of that was going on as the 100 Years' War was raging. But that is all for the 100 Years' War.